that audiences everywhere are saying the Holocaust didn't happen. I clarify this joke. After I saw this movie, I thought if they ever did those 90s style, the audience reviews the movie right after they see it in the theater, those type of ads, you would get the most anti-Semitic responses possible. You would get people who had a positive to neutral opinion of Jews going into the movie. Coming out, they would be like, it didn't happen.
Folks, it's Thursday, May 16th, and we've got Movie Sign. That's right. I know I mentioned it on Monday that we'd be discussing this one, but we're talking about really an astonishing cultural document. Really one of the strangest movies I've ever seen. The Jerry Seinfeld Pop Tarts movie that's currently on Netflix. And to join us to break this down is one of our oldest friends, Bryan Quinby.
I have seen every one of these product movies. I realized that as I was watching this, I was like, I even watched the Flamin' Hot Cheetos movie. Like, this one was definitely different from the other one.
Okay, like I guess like to set this up, the way you have to kind of position this movie is, Bryan, you are correct. This movie comes like hot on the heels of like a new trend in movies, the story behind a product movie. We've
So
seen the
stupid.
Flamin' Hot Cheetos one, we've seen the Air Jordans one, the BlackBerry ones, and I saw just the other day that they're making a movie about the woman who started Bumble. But that being said, the Jerry Seinfeld Pop Tarts movie, Unfrosted, which tells the story of all your favorite breakfast cereals, is essentially a parody of a genre of movies that has existed for about a year and a half. So you have to understand, like, that's one current that this movie is going in. The other current cutting directly across that previously mentioned strain that described this movie is comedian Jerry Seinfeld's unbridled hatred of humanity. And I think that's where we need to start with this, because I got to say, I would be fascinated by this movie. Like, this is very timely to do this episode because it was just revealed that Jerry Seinfeld and his wife are literally paying thugs to attack college students at UCLA. So it makes it a very timely entry into the show. But I got to say, were it not for, his paramilitary activities on behalf of Israel, I would still be fascinated with this movie because I find Jerry Seinfeld as a comedian and a cultural figure to be enthralling. But like for not for the reasons that he might imagine. And I have to credit Jesse Kroll with putting this into putting into words a feeling I've had for a long time, like going back to Seinfeld, the TV show. And that is like, there are so many comedians that are like, whether they're loved or hated, have this reputation of being like edgy, cynical, like against the world type, like, a Bill Hicks type figure who has this like acidic, acerbic hatred for humanity. All those guys that you can fill in the names in yourself, your favorite comedians in your head. None of them have anywhere near the cynical hatred for his fellow human beings as Jerry Seinfeld does. And the fact that he does it under the guise of like never blue, family-friendly, observational comedy is what makes him fascinating to me.
Yeah, he is the only person who could have made this movie. Only somebody who sacrificed kids on an airplane with Bill Clinton could have made this movie. It is like if Judge Holden had a budget. I don't know if you guys ever saw this. I always thought it was interesting. There was the show Workaholics. The guys who made it, they had this whiteboard that was just all like stuff that was like very hack and overdone in comedies by 2009. And there was stuff on there that was like, I could tell you, but I'd have to kill you. And even more like contemporary things by the time, which I thought was a really good move.
Mm-hmm.
Because, especially in that era when that show was made, there was so much of that in comedy. This movie is like if you took that whiteboard as advice. Literally every cliche in the history of modern comedy is in this movie. It is beyond harmful to watch. There is like an irradiating effect from this movie.
The simplest way I can sum up this movie is this is a movie about Jerry Seinfeld's genuine love and interest in breakfast cereals and his genuinely unspeakable hatred for human beings.
It's funny. Me and Felix probably have like a lot of experience listening to DJs and other comedians talk about Jerry Seinfeld. like, because he would go on Howard Stern and Gilbert Gottfried would make fun of him back in like the early 90s. And I remember there was a story of somebody told a story at the Comedy Cellar where the person's like, can I take a picture with you? And he's like, yeah. And they do the thing where they put their arm around him, and he just looked at him and said, could you not? And then took the picture. I always think about that when I think of Jerry Seinfeld, because obviously he has such contempt for people, and he has an image of being mean. All these guys say that he's mean.
I mean, he was mean even in character on Seinfeld. Like, and that's the other fascinating thing about this movie, is that it really shows you like the pure, like undistilled Jerry Seinfeld, shorn of the influences and collaborations with people like Larry David or Julia Louis-Dreyfus or Jason Alexander or even Michael Richards. And I got to say, the one Jerry Seinfeld moment that like crystallizes his personality for me is one of my favorite moments on TV of all time. This is when Michael Richards had to go on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno via remote. And like Jerry Seinfeld was there to coach him through it. He had to go on TV via remote after his disastrous stand-up set where he screamed the N-word at two black patrons of the comedy club. So Michael Richards goes on the Tonight Show, and the people in the audience think it's a bit when he starts apologizing to, quote, Afro-Americans, and the audience starts laughing. And Jerry Seinfeld, who's sitting right next to Leno, and the most angry I've ever seen him publicly like display behavior, just goes to the audience, don't laugh, it's not funny.
Yeah. That's like my favorite video. My favorite modern video is that was like the first apology before people knew how to do it. And it's such a, like, watching apologies from that era, that 2007 to like 2012 is like just a pure joy for me. There's actually a YouTube group. There's a YouTube page called Public Apology Central, where you can just go on there and watch apology after apology, and it is the best thing in the world. And the Kramer apology is the best because Jerry Seinfeld is so mad, and it feels like he's also mad because he's not controlling the audience.
Yes, exactly.
Like he thinks in any situation he's in, well, I'll control the audience.
It's his utter contempt for the people who are his audience, like the people who are supposed to be laughing at him. But when they laugh at something that he's trying to be serious about, or the one time where he's trying to be like normal, you could just see the absolute venom just boil up inside of him. And man, I mean, like this movie, holy shit. Now this movie has gotten slammed by the critics, but I just watched this before recording, and I had to like search out some reviews for this movie. And the Hollywood Reporter has a roundup of the reviews, and like a lot of major critics from like the Washington Post and San Francisco Chronicle liked this movie.
Anyone who gave this movie even a somewhat mildly positive review, even something that's like, put this in front of your dying grandparents, investigated, detained, sent to Guantanamo, executed, replaced by a hologram. Guilty of
I just want to read
pedophilia.
you some of these, like the faint praise, but still the praise nonetheless, from the San Francisco Chronicle, who writes, Seinfeld's over-the-top, throw everything but the kitchen sink approach makes for an uneven film with some gags inspired, others groan-inducing. But its 1960s period detail and constant parade of familiar faces keep things rolling. In fact, the most revelatory takeaway from Unfrosted is that Seinfeld is a really good director. He knows where to put the camera, and the film is excellently paced.
I'll give him, it's fast. The movie felt like it was
it did not
over
feel,
with.
Yeah. The best thing I can say about this movie is it is 90 minutes and did not feel 3 hours long. In fact, it felt significantly shorter than 90 minutes. It felt like a half-hour episode of 30 Rock, but not funny.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it felt like a cutaway from 30 Rock or like Family Guy. In a way, like where they cut away, like, oh, remember Country Squares? Like it just feels like he was Googling stuff. And it took it also, when I got to the end, right, my wife and daughter watched it with me. My daughter hated it, gave it a half star and said on Letterboxd, and just wrote stupid. And my wife got visibly agitated through the movie as it went, and Gwen would, my daughter would be like, oh my God, what is this? And my wife was like, they just want to make money. I was like, the sad part about this is, man, is these people aren't making a ton of money. They're doing this because they want to be there.
Yeah, well, Jerry Seinfeld, one of the things that is so perverse to me about Jerry Seinfeld, and to Will's point about him being such a fascinating person, but not for the reasons that he wants to be, his choices as a man who has the wealth of like a city-state are so fucking weird. This is a guy with like, at this point, probably billions of fucking dollars. Jerry Seinfeld could field a private air force. He could establish a deep space probe program. He could do anything. He chooses to do these things where he's like, I'm going to interview fucking Jimmy Carr about how hard it is to do college sets today. I'm going to do this movie, the most stilted, upsetting comedy of all time, for no financial motivation. He doesn't even need one. It's baffling.
The people in this movie probably took like a pay cut to be a part of this movie. And I got to imagine when you're like Melissa McCarthy and you're there all day. Well, I mean, she does a lot of crap. I'm trying to think like of somebody in the movie that's actually funny. And that's like very Jim Gaffigan. Jim Gaffigan. You gotta be like, this is not good. I don't think this is good.
You know, it's funny though because of Seinfeld's connection to the Israel-Palestine conflict. But this movie was a 90-minute hostage situation where like everyone who answers Jerry Seinfeld's phone call has been kidnapped into being in this movie, and have like basically I don't know, like they have devalued their career and talent in an astonishing way. Like, so if you have been funny on a TV show that has been well liked in the past 10 or 15 years. I'm looking at you, Tony Hale, Fred Armisen, James Marsden, Bobby Moynihan, Melissa McCarthy. The list goes on and on. The fact that they all said yes to Jerry Seinfeld to be in this absolute flop, like not a single funny moment in this entire movie. And it was just so clear, like he was just relying on like, oh, Jack McBrayer, people remember him. He was funny as Kenneth on 30 Rock. Let's just get him in playing the Schwinn bike guy who I then kill by setting on fire in this movie. And it's just like, it's such a shameless harvesting of like more talented friends. But, you know, Jerry Seinfeld doesn't have friends. If you're not his friend, he has abused you by putting you in this movie. And Brian, the thing that I thought watching this movie is something that you said like a couple weeks ago when like the press for this movie was rolling out. And to Felix's point, Jerry Seinfeld was like doing interviews where he was saying, you know, we couldn't make Seinfeld today because of, you know, wokeness or like, and he literally said, it's impossible to make a funny movie anymore. And holy shit, did he prove his own point. He was there to market and sell the movie, the comedy he had just made. And he's like, just so you know, basically making something funny is impossible these days.
I couldn't believe that was his like press strategy, was to say like, yeah, well, you can't really make funny things anymore. And it's like, oh, cool. Then I guess I don't need to see the movie because it's also not informative. I also want to say that it doesn't have that vibe that you get from movies where everybody's having fun and riffing. I don't get that vibe at all. I get that everything was written for them. It wasn't riffing at all.
No, there's a fucking, they have, Will talked about it before we were on the air, but there is a incredibly long post-credit sequence of like crack ups and failed takes, and they are the most unnatural crack ups I've ever seen. I think the gag reels on those North Korean movies that Kim Jong-un forced kidnapped Japanese filmmakers to make had more authentic gag reels. Like Jerry Seinfeld was pointing, like he had like a miniature Iron Dome pointed at Jim Gaffigan, and he was like, "You better fucking crack up. These people better believe we're friends on an offset."
The gag reel at the end of this movie over the closing credits is my favorite part of the movie, because it'll be like Christian Slater, and like the line is like, I'm from Friendly Farms, but he gets there and he's like, oh, I'm from Frosty Farms, and then like does the most strained like trying to crack himself up. And it's just like, there's so many scenes of them being around a big boardroom table, and like Jerry Seinfeld will say something and then they'll all desperately try to look like they're in on the joke, or it's so fun working with Jerry. the impression that I got of him, because he directed this movie too. He wrote, directed, and starred in this movie, is that like the damage that he has done to his friends by putting them in this movie, and like I'm sure being an absolute nightmare to work with. Like, I mean, as if Hugh Grant's career couldn't get any worse. He's playing Tony the fucking Tiger in this movie, and you can just see, like, I don't know, like his gambling debts or alimony, like just off screen, just out of screen.
It's funny because every character is Jerry Seinfeld in this movie.
Yeah.
That's how you can tell he wrote and directed it, is that every character is him. He could have done it like as a one-man show, basically.
Do you think that this movie was like the last thing they accomplished with like the last of the Epstein tapes? Like this was like everyone in here, either their agent or them, they were in like the bottom of the barrel of the tapes in that safe that the FBI confiscated and never talked about again.
The confusion I had too was all of the like cultural touchstones in this movie are for people that are 50 or 55 years old. Like, who it looks like it's kind of like feels like it's supposed to be like a zany Looney Tunes thing. Which, why would a fucking adult watch that? But it seems like it's made for children, but also it's made for like 60-year-old children, I think is basically who this movie was made for.
No, this movie was made for an audience of one. Jerry Seinfeld, because it is about like his actual interests, which are breakfast cereals, dental hygiene and his hatred of filth and disorder. But Felix, your point about the Epstein tapes, I just want to read a few more of these reviews here. The Guardian writes of this movie, there's a steady stream of excellent gags, creating a rising crescendo of silliness similar in effect to Seinfeld's own distinctive falsetto hysterical declamation at the moment of ultimate joke awareness. As a whole, it's not exactly a masterpiece, but amiable and funny in a way that's much harder to achieve than it looks. And then the Washington Post writes, the Unfrosted may be the platonic ideal of the Netflix movie. Ephemeral, edible, enjoyable, forgettable. It's essentially Jerry Seinfeld inviting everyone in his Rolodex to come over for an extended hang to parody the current craze for trademark biopics. The hit and miss joke ratio is decent. About 3 gags land for every one that gets stuck in the toaster. Okay, the Washington Post analysis of the gags to like the jokes to flubs ratio is worse than their coverage of Gaza. Honestly,
yeah,
like they're lying with statistics and this shit. And of those 3 reviews, I just gotta say, Felix, to your point, APAC, the lobby, that is the only thing that justifies or could possibly qualify even those measured good reviews.
Those film reviewers, they just woke up one day and there was like a dead Thai 11-year-old in their bed, and Jonathan Greenblatt from the ADL was there, and he was like, it would be a shame if people found out about this. I hear you're reviewing Unfrosted, though.
I'm trying to see, because Rotten Tomatoes, it got torn apart on there. I know that. And I was, the day we watched it, I was reading some of the customer reviews, not the critic reviews. And those were like, I just never seen people hate something so much. Like the way they talked about it was, again, like, I don't know. I think it has like a secret thing that makes some people get infuriated by it. Other people, maybe like me, find it hard to pay attention to. Even though there's like something going on every second, I was like, I wish I was looking at my phone right now.
Try chocolate fudge, chocolate vanilla cream too, creamy frosting, both brand new. Try the ones with fruit inside, real fruit filling, that's Kellogg's Pride. Kellogg's Pop Tarts, the ones with more.
Let's dive into the film itself, because there's some fairly extraordinary moments in this movie. And the very first scene of this movie, the very first image, I think, is like sort of a Rosetta Stone for understanding where Seinfeld is coming from with this movie. The very first thing you see on screen is like a handkerchief laid out on a bed, and a kid begins to fill like his hobo bindle with like cool like kid stuff of like our parents' generation. You know, there's like a Slinky in there. There's like a comic book. There's like baseball cards. There's like all this like sort of bygone nostalgia bundled up into this bindle. And then this kid goes to a diner and like recreating the famous Norman Rockwell painting of the kid running away from home. But he sits next to Seinfeld. And then Seinfeld begins to regale this child runaway with the tale of how he created Pop Tarts in the early 1960s. But like, it's
Yeah,
like what I'm focused on is that
premise.
weird, the weird sort of anti nostalgia in this movie is like it's at once both nostalgic but like also I don't know how to describe it hateful and repellent at the same time.
Yeah, I had no idea going into this that like I was under the impression that this would be kind of like the Hot Cheetos movie, where it's like the history may be kind of like fucked up, like they may have fucked a few things up, but it's supposed to be like a more or less like factual-ish retelling of how this happened. But my heart sank during that scene with the child where Jerry is trying to pick up the child in the diner. And I realized that it was just going to be like pure comedy. That is when I knew I was in for like basically the equivalent of a snuff film.
So the movie takes place in Battle Creek, Michigan, the home of both the Kellogg's and Post Company. And boy, oh boy, does this movie make a lot of the supposed rivalry between the two cereal giants in American history. Jim Gaffigan plays Mr. Kellogg. Basically, Jim Gaffigan, Jerry Seinfeld, and Melissa McCarthy are the three leads in this movie. And it's like, they're the people who created Pop Tarts. And like, let me ask you guys, were Pop Tarts a thing for you growing up? Because like, I know this movie is sort of a parody of nostalgia and these brand movies, but like, did Pop Tarts figure largely in your childhood? Because this movie makes it seem like they are as American as baseball cards, and that the invention of the Pop Tart was some seminal moment in American history. And I know they're kind of like playing that up as a joke, but like, I don't know. Did you have a relationship with Pop Tarts, either Felix or Brian?
I ate them a lot growing up because they were like not a breakfast. They were like more of a treat for me. But no, they're not like a thing that like I don't remember them like some old fashioned recipe that I eat so that I can feel nostalgia. You know, they're just something they sell at the store. But
yeah,
that's what I mean. Like Flaming Hot Cheetos or Air Jordan, like even Flaming Hot Cheetos, it's like I feel people have a connection to it because like I ate Pop Tarts too, but I don't feel or have any like I don't have memories of eating them, but it's like the same memories I have of like taking the SATs, you know, it's just, they're just there.
Right.
Like, I don't feel any way about them.
Jerry Seinfeld, instead of memories like we may have from our childhoods of like our family and our friends and happy, sad moments, the pangs of nostalgia, he just remembers products.
Yes.
It's so fucking perverse.
I also gotta say that, Will, you said this at the beginning. This movie was announced, I think, after or before Air came out and before the Flaming Hot Cheetos movie came out. Like, I don't know if this is, it was just, it comes off like Netflix was like, well, Jerry Seinfeld wants to make something, you know, it'll make us some money, which I'm sure it didn't.
No.
No way.
This is one of their worst, and even with all their juiced fake numbers, this is one of the worst worst things they've ever put out.
This is bad. It's worse than Red Notice.
Yeah. And here's the thing. Like, I know like right now at Cannes, Francis Ford Coppola is premiering Megaopolis, like a movie he spent $120 million of his own money. Like he sold off the vineyard he'd created over the last 30 years just to make this like insane, you know, possibly a masterpiece. And like this is the Netflix equivalent of that. We've been waiting since 2007's B movie for Jerry Seinfeld to come out with some more heat in the cinemas or on our TV screens. and he brings us Unfrosted. And like the thing is, B movie was genuinely deranged, like genuinely the diary of a madman. And I kind of wish that there was more of that in this movie, but this was just, it was bizarre, but not truly weird enough to be like, to really like have something there. This is just like I said, 90 minutes of pretty much nonstop gags, but none of them land. It's actually something spectacular. There's not a single good joke in this entire movie.
Right, B movie is like an interesting catastrophe because it's like Jerry Seinfeld is forced to confront like romantic love.
Yes,
which like, you know, I want like everyone posts this every 3 days. Oh, he dated a 17-year-old. And you know, that's probably the least weird thing he did. He probably got engaged to a viable fetus at one point after seeing this movie. But like this, because it's like it's about, you know, his center, like the way that he actually sees the world, which is through his relations to products and franchises. It's completely stripped down. It's his ideal version of the world, completely sanitized, no blue stuff, all products, all cliches, all the time.
Well, Netflix really desperately needed to get something from the twisted mind that brought you the marriage ref.
I used to fucking love when they would have to have Tom Papa on Opie and Anthony.
Yeah.
And they talked about him. They talked about it like they would talk about Memphis Bleak in relation to Jay-Z. Like when they used to have, when people had to hype up Memphis Bleak, like, you know what a good rapper Jay-Z is. Imagine how good his best friend is. That's what Tom Papa
was. I mean, like, I guess, like Felix, like you, like watching this movie. I know this was a comedy, but I didn't know like just how over the top it was going to be. And I guess the sinking feeling in my stomach began very early in the movie, in which the Kellogg's executives attend the cereal Oscars and win all the Oscars for their cereal. God. And now apparently Jerry Seinfeld, the one person who said no to him being in this movie was Chris Rock, because Seinfeld pitched him on restaging the Will Smith incident at the Oscars, but in his movie about the cereal Oscars. And Chris Rock was probably like, fuck no. And he just made better judgment than fucking Amy Schumer, who plays the head of the Post cereal company.
Amy Schumer looks like Casper Hauser's mom in this movie. She looks.
When I talk about cereal
crazy.
Mascot, she's looking like the Fruit Brute in this movie. Oh boy,
she looks insane. Did she sleep in a bee colony?
Talking about bee movie, yeah. And okay, I also got to mention Hugh Grant in this movie, playing the actor who portrays Tony the Tiger, the Frosted Flakes mascot, is truly upsetting. Because, and like just the thought of like Jerry Seinfeld giving acting notes to Hugh Grant, and look, like Hugh Grant, I don't think he's like, you know, like the greatest actor in the world or anything, but Hugh Grant, you know, he's got some juice, he's got some talent. So the idea that he would be fucking being ordered around by this lunatic cereal tyrant to debase himself further is very upsetting for me. And like the actor he's playing is how Jerry Seinfeld sees Hugh Grant and people who have serious talent, because he's like a grotesque parody of an actor who's like, I played King Lear and now I'm doing a mascot. But Felix, this is to your point. This is exactly right. This is how he sees people who are regarded as more talented than he is, as dumb suckers, you know, flogging high culture when they should be flogging brands.
No, yeah, this was a ritual humiliation. This was a ritualized humiliation ceremony for Hugh Grant. The thing about like black comedians in the dress, which I wholeheartedly believe in, this is Jerry Seinfeld invented a white version of that.
Yes. Oh my God, this movie is white buckbreaking.
Yes.
For all of the actors, for all of the actors that are in this movie.
Yes.
Trying to figure out also, like, are Snap, Crackle, and Pop actors that are like playing Snap, Crackle, and Pop, or are they really Snap, Crackle, and Pop? It's so hard to figure out where his mind was. Like the inconsistency of trying to figure out who is real and who is an actor playing somebody when, well, they're all actors playing somebody. But badly. But yeah, the scene where he threatens Snap, Crackle, and Pop to add a fourth person so they have to cut their money felt like such a fucking real thing Jerry Seinfeld would do.
Yeah.
Yes. That's what I mean. Is like that's why I find him so interesting. Is because like in his nice guy humor, he cannot help betray like this real meanness that comes across, and his real joy and cruelty. And I just there's so Kellogg's sweeps the cereal Oscars, but like Amy Schumer, who plays the Madam Cereal of the Post Company, who's this like And it's so weird at the end of the movie, they like try to like, they're like, the real Miss Post was a feminist hero who was one of the first corporate executives. But like in this movie, they play her as an absolutely grotesque, like sadist and lunatic.
That was strange. That thing where they did that is like, maybe somebody told maybe that's one of the reasons Seinfeld was so mad. Somebody told him and he was like, oh, this woke shit ruining my my Marjorie Post character.
Yeah. You want to talk about humiliation ritual? Like in a movie that at the end they're like, the real Margaret Post was, like one of the first female corporate executives. But in this movie, she is just basically like, she abuses her underling and like tortures him, and then has sex with Nikita Khrushchev to get all of Havana's sugar. To get all of the Cuban sugar. The Mrs. Post has sex with Nikita Khrushchev, played by Dean Norris, aka Uncle Hank from Breaking Bad.
Yeah, she's like a vengeful nymphomaniac grain whore. Like, what is the point of this fucking character? She's just like, all she does is like abuse her assistant, and she's like, does anyone have a dick I can sit on?
That's basically her whole character. Unpleasant. This movie passed the Bechdel.
No, I don't think it does, because everyone's just talking about cereal and all the amazing lore behind, Toucan Sam and the Smacks frog.
Oh,
and you can really tell that Jerry Seinfeld hates Post cereals too. You can tell that he's just like a Kellogg's fanboy.
His relation to childhood memories and like childhood touchstones, was he like raised in like a box? Was he like a sensory deprived child? Like his relationship to this shit is so weird. It's like he was like a feral child until he was like 9, and he's trying to fabricate memories of the 60s.
Well, it is weird because like if you ask me about stuff from when I was old enough that I would care that much about cereal, it would be stuff like, I don't know, TV shows, anything that is more than a box of Pop Tarts. Like it's like somebody asked him what he's interested in, and he just said Pop Tarts. I'm interested in Pop Tarts, and I'm interested in cornflakes.
Well, so like I said, the executives of the Kellogg's company, they clean up the cereal Oscars, which is hosted by Cedric the Entertainer, add him to the dishonor roll of people involved in this movie. He's in one scene, and he's playing the cereal Oscars host because Chris Rock said no. So they're at the cereal Oscars, and he looks over to the Post table, and like they're keeping calm, even though Seinfeld is winning all the cereal awards. And then he's like, I gotta know what they're up to. It seems like they have an ace up their sleeve. So the next day in Battle Creek, Michigan, he drives to the Post building, and in a really bizarre scene, he wants to know what they have up their sleeves. And then in a bizarre scene, he like stakes out their office, and then sees 2 children climb into a dumpster. Then the dumpster is picked up by a garbage truck, and the children are dumped into the compressor of a garbage truck. And I was like, this is kind of frightening. What, these kids are going to be crushed. And then they just pop out the back of the garbage truck. It's fine. They're unhurt. And then they just jump into the next dumpster. And then the Seinfeld character is like, what are those kids doing in a dumpster? And the driver looks at him and goes, they're there for the goo. They're looking for goo. They want the goo. And then and I'm like, what? And this is when I really started to disassociate in this movie. There's something about like, the humor, like this is played for jokes of kids rooting around in trash for goo and being thrown in the garbage. Like, once again, we got some psychology going on here, but basically he's like, hey, you kids, why are you eating goo out of the trash? And they were like, oh, because it's like this pastry goo that they keep throwing out. We love it. We can't get enough of it. And then he's like, my God, they're coming out with a fruit-based pastry. Cereal will never survive this. And like from there,
They've
it's just
done it.
Yeah,
because the part of the conceit is that he'd been trying to do this for a long, like it was a Manhattan Project for all the cereal companies, where like racing to make Pop Tarts was kind of what you were sort of supposed to believe, was that this was something that needed to be broken so that they don't really explain, like, is it so we can freeze out the milk industry, or is it like, why are we trying to make this thing?
There's a bizarre thing with like the milk people, like they abduct and torture Seinfeld.
Yes.
And by the way, one of the most offensive things in this movie to me was the conceit that Jerry Seinfeld's character is supposed to be like 43. He has like young children. And it's like, you're a 79-year-old man.
He looks so old.
You are older than Joe Biden. Yeah, my 2 6-year-old sons. What are you talking about?
Oh, he does. He looks so old in this movie. I couldn't believe like how old he looked. If he was going to play a younger character, they should have put done the CGI de-aging they did in The Irishman.
Or if you want to talk about Jerry Seinfeld's interests, at the very end of this movie, you want to talk about another humiliation ritual. The inclusion of CGI Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon. Because what does Jerry Seinfeld care about perhaps more than cereal? Appearing on The Tonight Show. But I guess he never got a shot to be there with Johnny and Ed. So he shows up at the end of this movie on The Tonight Show with Carson, but they're like CGI holographic puppets being like, we all love Pop Tarts. Hey, oh, Ed.
That's the funniest thing about that, Will, is that the thing that Gilbert Gottfried and Howard Stern made fun of Jerry for was that somebody that went out on a date with Jerry Seinfeld called into the show to talk about the date or whatever. And she said that Jerry took her to his house and they sat and watched Leno, and he told her how he would have changed the jokes and what made the jokes funny. Gilbert Gottfried goes off on that for like an hour. It's not funny.
Oh my God. I'd be like, can you just drug me? Can you just sell me into slavery instead of this? Jesus Christ.
One of the fun, that story will always stick with me because like it what it supposes is that he needs to be home every night at 11:30 to critique the monologue on the Tonight Show.
Holy fuck.
Oh, this is a true heart of darkness. And like Brian, you alluded to it, like I mentioned it already with the inclusion of Nikita Khrushchev in this movie, but like a lot of the jokes come from like this takes place in the Kennedy era, like the new frontier. And like a lot of the jokes in this movie come from like repurposing real events in American history of the Cold War, but to be about breakfast cereal and international intrigue based on whether Post or Kellogg's is going to be the first to create the Pop Tart. And like they even include Bill Burr playing John F. Kennedy. And the fact, and there's Bill Burr playing JFK and another guy playing Walter Cronkite in an absolutely hateful portrayal of Walter Cronkite. Chris Parnell is playing Cronkite?
Yeah, I think it's Chris Parnell.
Okay, yeah, he's just doing his Chris Parnell thing, but like it'll be Walter Cronkite, and there's a moment in the early in the movie where he's handed a piece of paper, and reads off of it like the Kennedy assassination, but it's about the announcement that Post is coming out with some sort of breakfast pastry, and then they'll cut to Walter Cronkite when like the camera like in between commercials, and he's just like doing these like hateful little muggings where he's just like, my wife told me the other day I shouldn't drink so much. And I said, I pay the bills. I drink as much as I want, you dumb bitch. And it's just like these little snippets of just like hateful cruelty in this movie. It's just
why does Seinfeld hate Cronkite? Like, what the fuck? Cronkite, like he's in the movie for like 30 seconds, and 20 of those 30 seconds he's like, I can't wait to go home and beat my slaves. Like, what?
And then the other 10 seconds is him playing with like a Whammo toy from 1950s, like, because that's the other thing. He's got the Wheel-O thing, and then he's got the silly putty. That's when I started to wonder about all of the cultural references would be like at home in an 80s sitcom. Like, that is how old a lot of the cultural references are in this movie. It's fucking crazy. Like the invention of like all these things that are invented. That's like Jerry ties back to whatever sensory deprivation tank he was in, where they handed him 3 toys when he was a kid and a box of Pop Tarts. And he was these are all I need.
So like, he was born in 1954. So like the world that this movie portrays is like the world of his childhood. And like that's basically where he stopped, like emotionally, I don't know, evolving or whatever. Oh man, it's so strange. And okay, so like basically they're like, oh, we're now in the space race, but to make who's going to make a toastable breakfast pastry first, and like none of these jokes land, none of them. Like these jokes are fighting for their life here. So basically, he goes to NASA because he's like, oh, I need my food scientist Melissa McCarthy, who's named Stan in this movie, and like here's an example of the great brand-based jokes in this movie. So Melissa McCarthy's working for NASA, like on the Apollo program, and she's like, oh, check out this new drink I invented, and it's orange. Jerry Seinfeld drinks it and goes, it's got a little bit of a tang to it. And she goes, Tang, that's a great name. I'll use that. And you're like, oh, bro, like, if you're a NASA head whose favorite fact about NASA is that they developed Tang for the space program, you're going to be loving this reference.
It didn't even like really occur to me yet that a lot of the because it's like that referential humor that they do a lot of times in like the Marvel movies, but it's for products. Like,
yes,
yeah,
because it also, what's his name, Jim Gaffigan, through the entire movie, every time they show him, he's drinking Tab, and it just makes me feel like you're supposed to point at the screen and say he's drinking Tab.
Really grim. And so like they continue with this extended riff on NASA because like after bringing Melissa McCarthy back into the Kellogg's fold, he's like, we need the best minds in America to help us like figure out how to create a toastable breakfast pastry. And then they bring together like the Right Stuff team that includes the Schwinn bicycle guy, played by Kenneth from 30 Rock, Jack McBrayer, Chef Boyardee, played by Bobby Moynihan, and then the guy who created Sea Monkeys, played by Thomas Lennon, who in this movie is a Nazi paperclip scientist, who they make several jokes about. What were you doing in the early 1940s? And he's like, oh, that's for me to know and you to find out. Oh, sea monkeys are so funny. And it's just like, in a different context, you could wring humor out of the idea of a Nazi paperclip scientist working for a breakfast cereal company. But Seinfeld is just like surface level only. That's it.
Right. Yeah. It's only the suggestion of a joke. He wants you to do the work of making all the jokes. He's like, okay, you know what you would do here. Connect the dots.
And then there's like a early IBM computer as well.
That was brutal.
It's
okay,
part
so
of
they try to do like an AI joke where the like old IBM computer has a personality, but the personality is like that it asks people if they were breastfed or bottle. Like, I don't even want to say it. It's so, like, what the multiple people had to approve of this.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think actually only one person had to approve of it.
Well, yeah.
I think that's really what's going on at Netflix is that they just give money to people who are established names and then they just let them do whatever they want without any editorial oversight. And then you get movies like Unfrosted.
Or Rebel Moon,
yeah,
Birth of the Scargiver, or whatever that is.
Wait, Brian, I've not seen the new Zack Snyder movies yet.
There's no way I could.
They're like 10 hours long.
Yeah. If they were like 90 minutes like this, I would watch unlimited 90-minute movies about products, but I will never watch it was supposed to be a Star Wars Zack Snyder movie.
Oh yeah, James Marsden plays Jack LaLanne, and there's a gag where the IBM computer is just like notices that you can see his balls through his like workout pants.
Yeah, that was great, and like it's trying to figure out how to solve. And James Marsden was in that really fucking funny show.
Oh, the Jury Duty show.
Yeah, it was great. No, again, good.
That's what I mean. It's like James Marsden just got nominated for an Emmy for that. That show was very funny. And it's just like immediately Jerry Seinfeld, who hasn't been on television except to like scold people in like 30 years, is like, I'm coming back for this. Just give me everyone that people like, and I'll humiliate them by putting them in this movie.
It's funny. I told you I was on the Rotten Tomatoes page. I found a person that reviewed this movie 5 stars.
Oh, wow.
And it says, a love letter to America and the Americana we all know so well. Thank you, Jerry. But the rest of his review,
this is a ransom note. This is a ransom note to the culture of America.
He's never given something less than 4 stars. like Heart of Stone, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. So it's like, this is a guy that I found the guy that likes this, and he also just likes everything.
So like, he's already riffing on the Right Stuff and the Cold War, but then he has to start riffing on The Godfather and like mob movies. Because there's this whole thing in this movie where they're like, we're milkmen, like the guys who used to deliver milk in glass bottles to your door. In this movie, they're like, oh, we never told anyone, but like the milkmen are the true mafia of this country, and like they're intimidating the cereal industry. And the fact that we're making a product that doesn't require milk, they're like, oh, they're gonna, they're gonna press us. And like, there's that shit, and then there's like they have to go to a meeting of the 5 cereal families, and like it's just shit like that. I'm just like, this is so hack. This is so tired. And like they're like, oh, it's like they're like the 5 families from The Godfather, but they're the cereal companies. And like, oh, here's the Keebler Elf and like the Quaker Oats guy, and they're sitting around some like darkened room, and Amy Schumer is like, from now on, you're going to pay us to use our sugar, which then leads to a thing where they go to Puerto Rico to talk to some guy who's like supposed to be the sugar king of the world, and like it's clearly they're riffing on like cocaine and sugar, and like he's some sort of Pablo Escobar figure.
El Sucre.
Yeah, El Sucre, and it's just like this is just it's so torturous. Like I don't even know what to say. Like it's so broad, but it's just making references to like things that Seinfeld likes and knows about, which are like movies from 50 years ago and breakfast cereal.
You think about the endless layers of people that saw this being made and like the process of it being made, and just being like, did they all know it sucked, or did they all think, wow, this is going to really blow people away? Because I don't think these brand movies aren't, I feel, a success. So I think the only good one, the only great one, the Flamin' Hot, I'm not going to be mean to the Flamin' Hot Cheetos movie because it felt like a feel good thing, like just not made for me. But Blackberry's the only one that Blackberry did.
Matt really likes Blackberry.
It did this, and it did it in a funny way. And I think that maybe we should have expected that this movie would be the way it was. But I think in my mind, when I was waiting for it to come out, this was going to be like Blackberry, because all you've heard your whole life is that Jerry Seinfeld's like the funniest guy in the world.
Well, in another example of the sort of subtle, hateful cruelty in the humor in this movie, there's a scene where they're pitching to El Sucre that they want to buy all the sugar. They're going to buy all the sugar in the world from him, so that Post cannot make their breakfast pastry. And they're like, Jerry Seinfeld to Melissa McCarthy is like, yeah, El Sucre, the thing you got to know about him is he really loves live entertainment. And you're like, oh boy, I can't wait to see where this joke is going. So they're like, he's like, yeah, before we do business, how about some entertainment? And they bring out Tony Hale to play a ventriloquist. And Tony Hale makes some crack about like the grouting on his tiles not being cleaned, and is like manhandled like off screen, taken outside. They're looking at like each other uncomfortably, and then you just hear a single gunshot, and they're like, okay, well, back to our sugar deal. And like, look, the movie shows that like they execute the ventriloquist dummy, not Tony Hale later, like, haha. But like, once again, this is Jerry Seinfeld's real attitude towards other entertainers, is that they should be beaten and killed by some sort of like tyrant for failing to be entertaining enough.
If anyone works blue, they should be killed. Their family should be exiled to the countryside. 5 generations should be punished. And Jerry Seinfeld will build a comic book store over your birthplace to wipe it off the map.
And this movie is so sort of almost unpredictable that in my mind, when they said he likes live stuff, I thought Jerry was going to do like a quick 5 minutes, which would make perfect sense for him and probably be much funnier than what ended up happening.
So I mentioned before, there's like the milkman mafia in this movie. And then they're like, there's like a milk truck parked outside of Seinfeld's house. And Christian Slater, for some reason, is just like, Mr. Seinfeld, the thing about milk is it makes strong bones. It's all the calcium. Without milk, one of your bones could get broken just like that. And then he gets abducted and taken to like a milk farm where they like take a bag over his head. And then for some reason, Peter Dinklage is like the head of the Friendly Farms milk mafia. In like a scene that goes nowhere and has zero effect on the rest of the movie. Like nothing comes of the milk mafia whatsoever, other than the fact that they torture him by making him run through a bunch of cows that fart on him, which I can tell it's like, once again, Seinfeld, the worst thing imaginable to him is filth and disorder.
That's true. Yeah, that like punishment seems so like, because they're like, oh, they could break bones and stuff like that. It was supposed to make the milk guys were supposed to be like the most ruthless people, and then they just had cows fart on him, and that was like his whole punishment.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, if you told, I mean, fart jokes, like you don't even think of Jerry Seinfeld as, he would be so against that. That felt like very out of character for me.
I want to zero in on something that you said about this movie being unpredictable, because this movie, there's a shocking duality to it, where on one hand, it's one of the most predictable movies ever, right? Because everything is telegraphed from 10 miles out. Every type of joke, you know what they're going to do. Oh, they're going to do a fucking mafia thing here.
Yeah.
Oh, they're going to do like a Colombian drug dealer thing here. Oh, they're going to do one of those Jerry Seinfeld things where it's like, I don't want to wash my hands, but you have to wash your hands. I'm a long hand washer, but he said freaking she uses a towel. I'm not a towel person. That type of thing. But it's so unpredictable in that the way that it's deployed is so haphazard and so impermanent. Like the only like things I see that have jokes like this where like there's no permanence or bearing on anything else and they exist just for jokes are those like horrific adult animation shows like Brickleberry that like Seinfeld would probably hate because they're all about like poop and farts and sex. But it is like a live action version, one of those, because there's no like texture or bearing on it. There nothing ever has time enough to like sit. Everything is so absurdly fleeting and impermanent while also being like the hackiest thing you've ever fucking seen in your life.
It feels like possibly, I would love to see this happen, that this seems like a movie that Seth MacFarlane could have made one episode of Family Guy. Yeah. And it would have actually been funnier than what Jerry Seinfeld was able to do.
No, Brian, not one episode of Family Guy. One throwaway joke in a larger episode of Family Guy where Peter is like, Lois, you know how they invented Pop Tarts? And then it just like cuts to a Nazi scientist putting sea monkeys in a ravioli that comes to life. And let me use that as an example of the unpredictability of this movie, despite how hacked the jokes are. I could never in a million years have predicted the mileage they would get out of a gag in this movie. Where like, while the dream team of like food scientists and the Schwinn bike guy and Jack LaLanne are helping them invent Pop Tarts, the sea monkeys guy and Chef Boyardee come together to put sea monkeys inside a piece of ravioli. That like it's like a move, and then it starts moving because there are like shrimp alive in it, and then they put it in a fish tank and it becomes like sentient and like escapes and is like sort of like a new. It's bizarre. It's so weird. It's not funny. And then they keep coming back to it. Like it'll just pop out of an air vent and be like, hee. And they'll be like, my God, was that a talking ravioli?
Braunhut and Chef Boyardee raised Eric, their pasta creature, as their own. Eventually finding out they were ill-suited to handle a rebellious teen ravioli.
Eric, I told you to put the pool cover back on. You hear the way your son talks to me.
Oh, when he talks back, he's my son!
Oh, you want to have this fight again, huh?
It's like, Jerry Seinfeld doing random.
Yeah, that's a talking ravioli. It was created for us by a Nazi war criminal. This is what I'm saying. This is the sick humor in this movie. It's very odd.
Yeah, it's so weird because it's like Jerry Seinfeld's such a sinister person, yet he's doing, like Brian said, random humor. Like he's a 72-year-old man doing like, I am the spork of doom, roar, XD. It's like, did you date a 15-year-old emo girl? It's such a bizarre person.
It makes you wonder if maybe some of these more random sort of jokes were Jerry Seinfeld saying, this is the crap that people like now, and just throwing out like a it'll be a ravioli that runs around, and there's no joke with the ravioli. I would love to say like what the payoff to the ravioli is, other than Chef Boyardee and the Nazi guy raising it as a teenager, I guess.
Yeah. Yep.
Like,
fucking god. Yeah.
Yep. Oh, and believe me, the ravioli comes back again at the very ending when it like cuts back to the diner where Jerry's grooming that runaway child to be his serial slave. Like the kid's like, were you telling the truth about the ravioli? And then he's like, nah, I was just pulling your leg with that. And then as the kid's parents come to pick him up, thankfully to save him from this horrible fate.
From slavery.
From serial
terrifying
slavery. From hearing about, why Conan isn't as funny as Jay Leno. The ravioli pops out of his breast pocket and is like, hi. And the kid's like, oh, look, there it is. It's bizarre. I want to talk about one more gag from this movie that I think is like a perfect representation of the kind of sadistic humiliation ritual that Jerry Seinfeld is enacting over like newer and currently more beloved TV comedians is the scene with Jack McBrayer where, Jack McBrayer, Kenneth the Page, one of like everyone's favorite character from 30 Rock. Like the show that the 30 Rock is the show that's probably like the most recent heir to Seinfeld as like an NBC half-hour sitcom that's like very well regarded, that people really love it. But because it's not Seinfeld, Jerry Seinfeld, of course, hates it. And there is a scene where they are testing Pop Tarts for the first time. And like Kenneth the Page, they dress him up in an astronaut costume with like an oxygen tank. And like he goes into like the test room to like press down the toaster for the first time. And it's all played up like, like it's like NASA or whatever. And then they're like, we did it. It works. And then like the tube connecting his oxygen tank to his spacesuit comes undone and starts spraying pure oxygen everywhere until it goes directly into the toaster. And then it explodes and like he's engulfed in flames. And they're like, oh my God, did we just kill the Schwinn bike guy? And then there's like a figure coming out of the smoke and they're like, oh, no, my God, thank God he's still alive. But it's just like some technician holding the empty astronaut helmet. And he's like, no, he's dead. He's blown to bits. Don't go over there. He's dead. And then there's a scene where they have a funeral featuring the Jack McBraier's wife's, like his character's wife is at his funeral. And she's like, why am I here? Like, why'd you kill my husband? And then they proceed to have a funeral in which cereal mascots pour cereal into his grave in front of his wife and hand his wife a folded up, the prize inside the box. And she's like crying, and Jerry Seinfeld's like, "That's a shame." Anyway, let's go on. It's just like his need to, if only he could have gotten like Dan Castanella or Matt Groening in this movie, he probably would have done like a Brandon Lee to them on set for what The Simpsons did to like compete with Seinfeld.
It's like a ritualized execution of people who he thinks are like defaming Seinfeld's legacy.
The Bill Burr one, really, that's the one. There was always going to be somebody in this movie where you were like, God damn it, I wish they didn't do this movie. And Bill Burr, poor Bill Burr, knowing it's not, he can't think that shit was funny, right? Because the whole joke is, JFK fucks a bunch of women, which is such a fucking 80s JFK joke, like where it's like, he fucked Marilyn Monroe and now he's gonna fuck the Doublemint twins.
Yes, I forgot about that. Oh my God.
The Doublemint twins. Okay, it's like if he could just have had like a 2000s product, maybe just show up in like a Jolly Rancher even, or literally fucking anything that a 19-year-old would know. My daughter didn't know any of the references in this movie. Okay. And as I was sitting next to her, I was just like, she has no fucking idea why. And nobody's laughing. So you're just kind of sitting there. Might as well be a drama. It's three people with three different sensibilities, all just staring at the TV.
Okay. Similar to the Jack McBrayer, Kenneth the Page example, I want to talk about you want to talk about a humiliation ritual. There is nobody in this movie who comes out looking worse than fucking John Hamm and John Slattery, who turn up as Roger Sterling and Don Draper, just playing the characters that they did on Mad Men like 10 or 15 years ago. And they just come up to pitch them on like a sexy advertising campaign for a breakfast pastry. And it is humiliating. It's embarrassing. These guys are like on one of the best TV shows of all time. It's like everyone's favorite TV show. And they are reduced to this now. Oh my God. The fact that they said yes to this, of just like squeezing the last drops out of the last thing they did that anyone respected. And then just like, it was abominable. And that's what I mean. Like, that's where the sadism in this movie comes from.
Yeah. And do you remember the part in the Mad Men scene where, like, they just, like, they make fun of Mad Men, basically, and then Jerry Seinfeld's like, why are you guys so serious? It's just advertising.
Yes.
And it's like
He's
that's
like,
his...
He, like, turns to the camera and just goes, it's just advertising. It's like, you can tell how mad he is that people liked Mad Men, and it won all those Emmys.
What is this fucking movie you're doing? If it's not advertising, I don't know. You say Pop Tart 700 times in a movie. God.
He is one of the most evil people alive. Like, he is such a piece of shit. He's like, did John Hamm and John Slattery going to this, did they know that they would be, like, basically given, like, a ritualistic execution? Like a Jerry Seinfeld style self-criticism exile.
He just was like so mad that they got a different kind of respect. And Jerry only gets one kind of respect for his whole life. And it's like,
oh, he's great Show audience.
Yeah. He's great at fucking talking about how you're always losing a sock or something like that. And that's where, like, all of his things come from.
That there is cultural appreciation for, like, art or comedy or anything that is at a different register than what's the deal with losing socks? Who's taking these things? Is like, you can tell it burns him up. And I gave the Chris Rock example. This thought just occurred to me. How much would you bet? Because honestly, this is off the top of my head, but I would stake my life on it, that Jerry Seinfeld made an offer to Aaron Paul and Bryan Cranston to play Walter White and, you know, his underling, to just be, like, on the food team, and they would be like, yo, Mr. W, we're cooking up some excellent meth here or whatever. It just playing their characters. And, like, the joke is just, oh, it's Walter White and Jesse from Breaking Bad, but they're making Pop Tarts.
Going back to, like, his hatred of anything that isn't him, he responds to all comedy that isn't Seinfeld and him personally, like Chris Chan did when they changed the color of Sonic's armor in the spot. Like, it's so he has, like, a bizarre, like, submental violent response to it. He's like you know, I'm gonna kill Barney guy, but just for every non-Seinfeld thing.
It seems like he really has, like, the person I'm glad. Well, I'm not glad he's not around, but James Gandolfini would have been offered this movie.
And he would have been the Milk Mafia. Then that's why they cast Peter Dinklage from Game of Thrones and not James Gandolfini as the head of the Milk Mafia. Because I guarantee you, Jerry Seinfeld was like, let's reach out to Gandolfini. Of course he'll do this. And then someone had to tell them, he's been dead for nearly 20 years.
Let's force his son at gunpoint. Let's torture his remaining family. I met James Gandolfini once, and he double dipped the pigs in the blanket. I don't like a double dipper.
And you know, they're like, okay, we have the lead from Game of Thrones, and, like, Jerry Seinfeld, I'm sure he knows that. I'm sure he doesn't know anything about it. He just knows that it's popular and he hates it. And he's like, okay, let's get this dinky guy in there. And then he gets on set and he's like, what did I say? No child actors. What's wrong with you?
I am very surprised he didn't, because there are times where he breaks into the guy he does on stage. Like, it's the thing that Felix is doing. It's like, I hate a double dipper. And, like, everybody in the fucking, it made me think about Seinfeld differently too. Cause everybody in a movie, they can't just do what a person would do after a guy says, I hate a double dipper. They have to go like, oh, they're always dipping twice. Like, they always have to riff, but only on his wavelength.
Yeah, it's like he being on set with him must be like living in a dictatorship. It's what, like, that woman says North Korea is like. Like, at any time, if Jerry Seinfeld confronts you and forces you to do his stupid ass fucking Seinfeld bit, you have to comply or your entire family will be killed. Yeah. If he goes up to you and goes, have you ever seen anyone eat circus peanuts? You have to go, no, but they keep making them.
Or if your riff lands and people laugh genuinely to it, he'll just, like, there's like a pound on set, and he just walks a dog in front of you and shoots it in the head to punish you for being funny, for making the craft service guy chuckle a little harder than his stale riff about the Kennedys in 1962.
He is one of the worst people to ever live.
Well,
He's
we talk about this
so
movie like where
evil.
it seems like frozen in time, like where it's like about the 1960s, but like basically has the humor of the mid 1980s in it. However, I want to make one exception when the end. Talk about something that is unpredictable. The end of this movie wades into contemporary politics, and by wades in, I mean make the most cursory passing reference to contemporary political events in a way that is shorn of any context, humor, or political point of view. But basically, the climax of this movie occurs when Hugh Grant has taken all of the cereal mascots on strike. And believe me, there's a scene where they're picketing in front of the Kellogg's building. And I was praying to God. I was like, please let there be a scene where Jerry Seinfeld's character hires like cereal Pinkertons to attack them. Because that would just be a little too perfect. But sadly, no. But what does happen is like the FDA is in the office and they're going to certify FDA approval of Pop Tarts. But like Hugh Grant shows up dressed like the QAnon shaman and leads a January 6th riot of cereal mascots into the Kellogg's building like it is the capital of the United States. And it's just like, again, my jaw was on the floor that this is where they were going with that. But like, it's so odd because like there's no political point of view at all.
Yeah.
It's just sort of like, here's a thing that happened. Wouldn't it be funny if it was cereal mascots?
There's no amount of convincing that you could do for me to believe that Jerry Seinfeld gives a shit about January 6th or Donald Trump or Joe Biden. Like, you could never convince me that he cares at all.
Well, he cares about one issue
it.
very specifically,
Well,
yeah.
very passionately.
He probably didn't care about January 6th, and then someone was like, what if somebody did that to the Coke Museum in Atlanta? And he was like, oh my God, we have to kill all these people.
Oh God. Okay. Oh wait. I mean, like we're basically at the end of the movie, but there's another moment at the end of this movie that was jaw dropping to me in terms of how like unpredictable and just wrong it was. So at some point in the movie, like there are numerous references to Andy Warhol, and they're like, Pop Tarts, isn't that like his crap pop art? You know, like he's shitting on Andy Warhol in this movie. And at the end of the movie, like after Pop Tarts have become a big success and they've sold out of every store and the Kellogg's Corporation is vindicated and everyone just remembers how great Pop Tarts are. Then there's a scene where Jerry Seinfeld goes on like CGI hologram Irishman style, like resurrected Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon. And while he's on the show, Eugene Levy's awful nitwit son, that fucking the Schitt's Creek guy who I can't stand. He portrays Andy Warhol, who runs on the set of The Tonight Show and shoots Jerry Seinfeld in the chest for stealing his pop art creation.
But like everything else in the cereal world, there was always a surprise inside.
It's Andy Warhol, creator of pop art.
Your 15 minutes is up, Cabana. Only I can be derivative.
And thanks to Stan's titanium foil packet, I was okay.
I was like, this is fucking wild. Because I guarantee you, Jerry Seinfeld was vaguely aware of the film titled I Shot Andy Warhol and just got it flipped in his head, thinking that Andy Warhol shot someone. It's like Andy Warhol is like very famously was nearly killed by being shot several times by an insane person. And once again, where does this hate for Andy Warhol come from? And what is this idea? It doesn't even make sense as a joke that Andy Warhol would shoot someone on national television. It's just so odd.
One, because he's stupid, and I think the 100% he's so stupid that he's like, oh, he just painted a soup can. What's this shit? You know what I'm like? Where he's mad that Andy Warhol made a living painting soup cans, and he had to tell stories. He had to tell jokes about
it's all airline jokes. Yeah.
It's got to grate on him a little bit that like when people make fun of like, because listen, he can tell jokes. I'm not saying he's bad at telling jokes or whatever, but it does have to grate on him that when you make fun of hack comedy, when you make fun of, it's always, what's the deal? Like, it's always his voice that does it. He has to fucking know it. He has to have seen it happen at enough comedy clubs to be like, oh, fuck, people kind of do make fun of me, but he's the guy that can do it. He's the guy that invented it. Like people didn't do it before him, but still he's what we use to make fun of old comedy. Like it's that old 80s comedy boom comedy. is what he does. And
You know,
it like
I gotta say, speaking of like the 80s comedy boom, to atone for this dog shit movie, Netflix needs to give $200 million to the person most vindicated by this atrocity. And that is funny 80s alt comedian Bobcat Goldthwait, who was the first person to ever sound the cultural alarm about how poisonous Jerry Seinfeld is as a cultural presence. And Seinfeld has never forgotten that. And he takes every opportunity to try to shit on Bobcat Goldthwait. So they need to give Bobcat money to make. Bobcat, by the way, is a very funny director who has done a number of really funny movies. So Netflix needs to give Bobcat Goldthwait whatever the budget for this fucking movie was to do whatever he wants.
Howard Stern, just hand over the Gilbert Gottfried Seinfeld. What, like the time when he filled Jerry Seinfeld's answering machine doing Jerry Seinfeld jokes. Like, put those on Netflix, please.
Yes.
So like Bobcat Goldthwait directed World's Greatest Dad.
Yes, he did.
I didn't know. I love that movie.
World's Greatest Dad is awesome. And
Windy City Heat.
He was in Windy City Heat, which is one of the funniest.
No, he directed it too.
Oh, he directed it. Oh, he plays the director. Oh my god, when he has the like, he's wearing the jodhpurs and has like the like early 20th century like bullhorn to like make him keep jumping in a dumpster. Yeah, see Windy City Heat and World's Greatest Dad.
Yeah.
I think there's another one that I really like too, but I have to like
God Bless America.
One. That one's good. I like that movie. I mean, he's great. He was great. He's also Police Academy.
Police Academy movies, starting with Police Academy 4, Police Academy 3, Take It to the Streets, or Citizens on Patrol. Fuck, I forgot to say Police Academy 3.
There's the one I watched 1,000 times and didn't understand was Shakes the Clown on it was on HBO all the time when I was growing up, and I liked him from Police Academy, so I figured, this has got to be good.
And you know what, Netflix, give Michael Winslow a special. I want to see his wacky sound effects.
He would perform here like all of the time when I was growing up, and I would see his name in the newspaper and be like, Dad, we gotta go. It's Michael Winslow. He does the sounds, but never got to see it.
The world's greatest sound-based comedian, Michael Winslow. That's the Unfrosted movie by madman and tyrant Jerry Seinfeld, probably the most evil person on the planet. I would recommend watching it just for as we previously mentioned, the end credit sequence where you see some of the most forced. We're all having fun making this movie, flubbing our lines. Ha ha ha! It's very funny. You can almost see a bayonet just out of frame pointed at them.
Do not watch it with your family. Just be like, no, I'm going to do this on my own, like it's porno or something.
Yeah. Watching this alone, I felt like Marty Hart watching the tapes that Ruskell brought back. Turn it off.
No, yeah, I was like Rust. I was like to Felix. I was like, "There's something you got to see, and there's no way around it." So just sat you down in front of a TV. And you're like, fuck.
I mean, my daughter wanted to watch it because we watched the trailer a long time ago, and she was like, "Oh, we got to watch that together. It looks terrible." My wife, on the other hand, did not want to watch it and just sat on the couch the whole time and didn't laugh once, didn't even like smile. I was like, "Man, this
movie." You know how hard it is for like a 90-minute comedy that features like funny comic actors to not even elicit like a polite chuckle out of me. Like not even in the 90 minutes of this movie, I did not even once go, like nothing.
No, nothing.
What a grim spectacle. Oh man. And like I said, to all those, the San Francisco Chronicle and Washington Post TV and film criticism writers, boy, you're going to hell for this, man. Like whatever you've done in your life, the blackmail on you will compel you to write this shit. You're going straight to hell. There is no redemption for you.
Terrible fucking movie.
Yeah. Bryan, thank you so much for joining us. If people want more Bryan Quinby content, if they want more guys, what do you got cooking right now?
Guys, a podcast about guys. It's we got grilling guys coming up soon. We just had Brace on to talk nicotine, guys. I recommend that episode if you've never listened to the show, because there's some people on Reddit doing some stuff with nicotine that you might not believe. There is a guy.
Preview, yeah.
There is a guy I found in that episode that went to the nicotine subreddit and said, "Can I make tea out of a tin of Zyn?" And everybody had to say, "Please don't do that." It might kill you.
Oh my god.
But yeah, that's it. Just guys.
All right. Well, check out the guys' Patreon. Link will be in the show description. Bryan, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Always a joy. Thank you for enduring this god awful movie with us. Truly a depressing spectacle. But I think if we all pitch in, we can get Jerry Seinfeld put in jail.
Look, you guys only make me watch 90-minute movies, which
Thank
is very
God.
nice. Because the last one I did was that bad Joshua Jackson 90-minute movie. So it's fine. I can do anything for 90 minutes.
And I'm sorry for potentially endangering your life, because I know this episode will get back to the man himself, and he will soon be hiring some sort of paramilitary fascist goons to break our legs or pepper spray us. Or we didn't even talk about Israel on this episode, but
no.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the reasons I think Amy Schumer is just annoying. Like, you watch somebody that you've seen the stuff she said about Israel, and you're like, am I really supposed to laugh at this shit? Like, she sucks.
He missed the beat not putting Brett Gelman in this movie, because he would have.
Yeah.
That would have been great, though.
Well, Brett Gelman he was probably supposed to be in this, and then Jerry Seinfeld saw him wearing like a maxi denim skirt and like an open cardigan with no shirt on underneath, and was like, what happened to slacks?
What happened to slacks?
Can I tell my one personal interaction with Jerry Seinfeld on the way out?
Yeah, please.
Years ago, I was filming something for Vulture, the Vulture Festival that involved a bunch of comedians, and I was doing backstage interviews with people, and one of them was Jerry Seinfeld. I was a freelancer at the time, providing all my own gear, and I was laving him up, putting the mic on, and it was my own stuff. And he took one look at the cheapest lav mic that you could buy on Amazon, and just goes, "What's the deal with the shitty lav? Who brought the terrible gear? I thought Vulture could afford better." And I was like, "It's mine, sir. I have to provide my own stuff." And he just did the like disgusted hands up, like, "Oh," gesture at me, and then I had to ask him a bunch of questions about.
He's never wrong. He's never wrong. He's always just goofing.
God.
Oh God. Unfrosted on Netflix now. All right, till next time, everybody.
If you want to join Boko Haram, we'll put some links in the description for this episode.
Till next time, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.